Hello and welcome to our Agile Boston podcast. I am Joe DeAngelis here with one of my most wonderful colleagues from the Agile Boston leadership team, Ann Brea. And today, Ann is going to talk to us about a recent experience she had with a team that experienced the downsizing and then became very curious about becoming a more agile team.
Can't wait to get started.
So Ann, I'm hearing you're having a lot of fun with a team that recently had a kind of a bad experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yes, I support working at a startup, and we were attempting to adopt Scrum. It's probably the word choice that I would use for that part of the experience. And then the team itself experienced a downsizing, and with the smaller team who really wanted to still produce as much as they could, they started to get really curious about being agile and learning more about agility. So the kind of their easiest place to start was say, we know a little bit about Scrum, let's adopt Scrum. We're going to go through the Scrum guide. We're going to move forward and see what we can learn on this. And so they were ready to get started. And the thing that had really that I saw made a big difference was kind of living the pain of that, recognizing, oh wait, now this has changed.
Now we're a smaller team and we still got to do a lot of work.
and the company still needs us to be just as productive as we were. Oh no. Okay, because everyone really wanted to rise to the occasion, and everyone wants to do the best that they can. So the level of curiosity grew quite quickly, almost overnight.
Overnight, nice. And so how did it go? How did it go with adopting Scrum? How did you start?
We found kind of one of our biggest wins with the Scrum guide was the sprint review, which kind of has its own journey that is still growing and maturing. When I first joined, it was very much a presentation to the organization. We're pushing out this information to you, and slowly.
Was it just internal people in the organization, no one external?
But the extended organization, everyone is invited. So it's not although we don't
really have, we're just telling you what we're doing, but we're not actually looking for feedback.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha.
And as the team what was now living the need to be working on the highest value first, they recognized that they were longing for some of that feedback, curiosity. Hey, sales. Hey, CEO. Hey, executives. What are you hearing? What that kind of, they were longing for that kind of conversation and knowledge. And we, not overnight, but we each time, and we shared with the organization, this is our goal, is to have this event be more collaborative and be more involved with other parts of the organization. And we did it over time, and now other teams are actually also kind of have their own. We still use a slide deck, but only for visuals, for bullet points, actually, it's more for reference in the future, so we can look back and see the patterns of what we're sharing. And we also have some of our questions on the slides too. But we have different teams who have representation who are sharing what they have done, what their group has done in this 2-week period of time. And often there are dependencies. These are the other teams that engineering has dependencies on. So it's collaborative that way, because we're talking about what those dependencies are and mean, and what we need to be thinking about. Whether the first part of the review is, of course, what we've done, and then as we look forward, that collaboration continues, and that's more.
Are all the teams working in 2-week sprints, sort of at the same time? Same cadence?
Not everyone else is doing Scrum, but we have, what the whole organization does is use that 2-week cadence for our feedback.
Good. Good.
So that's the part that we have in common. So the review has been a huge win for the team from the Scrum Guide. Planning has taken a different path.
Oh yeah, tell me what's going on there.
So planning, the same kind of thing. We started with the Scrum Guide, read it. We jumped in with both feet. Okay, we're gonna block off this. We can plan for the next 10 days of what we're gonna do. And it kind of worked the first few sprints. Okay, yeah, then we learned things. Well, we shifted. Oh, but we still got our sprint goal. Like we're sacred. Our sprint goal was the most important thing until I forget which sprint, where almost around halfway through the sprint, diving into the details, working on it, the team realized that they learned something that meant that the sprint goal was no longer valid. And they all kind of went, what? Wait, but this is like what we're connected to. This is what so there was the emotional part of, but oh no, like now what do we say? And I'm like, we share this. And they kind of, it took them a minute. It took everyone a minute.
Did you actually cancel the sprint when you found out that the sprint goal was obsolete?
We canceled the sprint. And now this is where I also want to go back to, we canceled the sprint and we canceled the sprint goal. We canceled the sprint and said, okay, we have X number of days left. What can we do? We don't know, but what we do know is we know the next priority, which I want to word it that way, because the way it happened, as it happened that way, that sparked interest and curiosity in Kanban.
Really?
So in the learning about Kanban. So with that scenario, I want to go back to the sprint review, because then the team, they got something else very important done, of high value. And we went into the sprint review with the whole organization saying, yep, we just failed hard. Excuse me. We learned, and they shared the details of what they learned. So that context of why the sprint goal was no longer valid, and it was connected to, so when we build this other thing, which we know we're going to do, but just not now, then we're going to redo it. So anything, if they had continued with the bigger context was, and why it wasn't valid anymore or valuable anymore, is because had they continued, it was going to be replaced in a couple months by something else.
And that's a really good point for everyone, is that, sprint reviews are not always about success. They're not always about, look at what we did, but it's a very important element to say what we didn't do and why we didn't do it. And what did we learn from it?
We learned, and that sharing the learning piece enabled the team to find courage. Because you go to the whole organization, the sprint review, we're going to do this as our sprint goal for the next sprint. And then 10 days later, you come back and you go, well, guess what? that didn't quite work out as planned. And
but you learn from it. But this is what we learned, and this is what we're going to do instead moving forward, right?
The organization, it was set up in a way that the organization could embrace that. And so the team going in with that courage, and the courage, how many of us, we put so much effort into planning, right? Like that's the thing, we put all this. So saying that our plan is no longer valid is hard to let go of. And it took the team, that's where I embraced it and shared with the whole organization, that story of the courage. I was the one who kind of framed up that part of the conversation to the organization, which enabled the team to be like, oh, okay. So it was a good, learning is good, versus discovering that the plan that we had was bad. We could lean on that learning is good. And it really enabled, it enabled the team to have more courage and to build their courage, but it also enabled the organization to better understand the why and build trust. The trust on both sides grew, and it improved our sprint review as well.
And I was going to ask, you had mentioned that since then other teams have picked up doing a sprint review. Do you think that those other teams were more open to doing it because they saw that your team had so much courage to say, hey, we didn't get our goal done because it became obsolete?
It definitely had an impact in it. And so we now the sprint review, as it's continued, has other teams that have dependencies on engineering and that engineering has dependencies on. So we're being much more collaborative and transparent, seeing when things are going to get done and when those dependencies are needed, and keeping our conversations going forward. We of course meet regularly in between the sprint reviews. So as other things and dependency dates might change, we have that communication open. But the building of it, the foundation of the relationship really kind of has started in this, the engineering team sharing their vulnerability with the organization. Was a huge part of that foundation that has enabled our sprint review to get where it has gotten.
Well, I mean, we always say that the Scrum values are all linked together. Courage can only happen if you have respect, and openness can only happen if you have courage. So that's how the Scrum values are really linked together. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that this experience caused your team to change how they're planning, and you also mentioned Kanban. Can you tell me more about how that all integrated together?
So as they started getting curious about having this experience of spending all this time in the sprint planning was not the shortest event. Let me just word it that way. So, and engineers had shared with me before their ability to maintain their focus during that, because planning was so long. They were struggling. I mean, they wanted to be there, they wanted to be engaged, but they were struggling with engagement that long. So those were some of the pain points that the team had experienced before as well. And with this experience that they had of canceling the sprint and saying, well, we don't have to plan for the next however much is left. Let's just, what we do know right now is the next highest value. And they grabbed that and they swarmed on that. And this team also has a very low WIP limit, which they did naturally. This wasn't something that I suggested, but they, wanting to be as effective as possible, the recognition of context switching and the cost of it is something that they've lived. So that's where they really sort of started to lead towards, no, we're going to stay focused on this while it's in our heads. We're not going to context switch to fixing, some bug, some problem. We, work closely with the product owner, is this critical or can it wait 24 hours or, can those kinds of conversations. So, so that really enabled them to, with having a low WIP limit and just naturally not wanting to context switch. I should say that the WIP limit came later. Their focus was to not context switch, to be as effective as they could. Then they started working on the highest value. And when that was done, or the highest two values, sometimes
do they naturally work together as a team, or do they sort of take if there's 4 people on the team, they all take the top 4 things and they kind of work separately?
They swarm until someone says, I'm not effective here anymore. And they say, what's the next? And this is a conversation in our daily, which is, about that, yes, I can jump on that. And then, product owner, the conversations, negotiation with the product owner about now what is the next item in our backlog to pull in. And that's when we pull it in. We loosely pull some things into the sprint, but it flows back and forth. The things to do column in the sprint keep moving around as the sprint continues. So I don't want to say that we don't bring things into a sprint in Jira, but they don't get them started. That negotiation about which things get started, and things will, okay, this other thing is a higher priority. We'll shift, very Kanban-like.
So one question that comes up that other people might be thinking about is, does it impact your sprint goal when you're just pulling the next highest thing off the backlog?
We're not creating a sprint goal anymore. We're looking at that highest value. Now, the one thing we are doing in the context of the sprint, and it's with the other teams with the dependencies, at the beginning of a 2-week period, we'll say, okay, what are the dependencies out there? What are the things with fixed dates that we need to be aware of? And so the engineering team's aware of it, data science, customer success. We have that conversation and that visual. of that piece of the 2 weeks, then the team looks at, okay, we're gonna spend the first part of this, we're gonna work on all the getting these dates, the things with the fixed dates done. They're all small. Usually those are small too, just for context. And then things that don't have the fixed dates are product related, product improvement related, and those tend to be bigger chunks. So that's also how they fit kind of the big chunk of the work that is product related along with the fixed dates. They say, okay, let's do this next item might take us 4 to 5 days. So these fixed dates we're going to take care of those first, and then we're going to focus on this bigger item.
So I would imagine this can still work because in your daily Scrum, your team is still focused on the top priority items, and that's what they're focused on and talking about getting done. So they may not have a sprint goal that they're focused on, but they do have a clear priority and a clear focus. Is that true?
Yes, they do. And those product items tend to be sprint goal like, if that makes sense outside of the context of the team. It's not quite the same as a sprint goal, but they are, because they're focused around some functionality of the product and supplying, creating that functionality. So that it feels like a sprint goal, but it's not quite the same.
Right. But it's still creating the focus. And I think that's the message we want to say is that, again, going back to the linking of the Scrum values, you can't have commitment, which is what a sprint goal is, unless you have focus. And it sounds like this team here is able to focus on the highest priority items, and therefore they can commit to driving them to completion within a certain time period.
And there are times that highest value, that product item, let's say PBI item, gets done within the sprint. And other times we go into the sprint review and we share that this is in progress. We've gotten this started and this is still in progress. And once we complete it, then this is the next focus that we're going to be working on.
So I can imagine this team is extremely happy and extremely productive. Is that true?
It is true. They are working. I don't want to put words into their mouth, but it feels like they're actually working harder than they used to work before, because they don't have the downtime. They don't have the waste that's built into it. But they're smiling. They're looking at the challenges that they have, going, wow, this challenge is hard. Like, we're solving this hard puzzle and we're going to get it solved. Like, we're going to figure out.
Yeah, everyone loves an adventure, right?
To do it, and they're smiling much more than I remember them smiling before. There are more cameras on too.
That's always helpful. It's better than looking at a person's face than an initial on a blank screen. Well, Ann, I want to thank you very much for sharing this story with our community here. And I want to remind everyone that if you want to hear more stories like this, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our latest podcasts. Also, find out what's coming up at Agile Boston. We're doing virtual events the fourth Wednesday of every month, and live events now starting in April, starting tomorrow, in fact, at Scrum Org in Burlington at 5:30 p.m. every second Wednesday of the month, all the way to Give Thanks for Scrum, which is in November, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And we'll be sending out more information about that. So until then, again, thank you, Ann, for your time today. And we'll see you next time on the pod.
Thank you for this opportunity to share the story of a team I'm working with and who is really excelling.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Till next time.
Bye, everyone.